Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans in business. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze.
Today's guest is a phenomenal human being, a seasoned market strategist, a former New York Stock Exchange veteran, and host, a fellow host here on Yahoo Podcast, Yahoo Finance. His podcast is called Trader Talk. He witnessed 9/11 firsthand. And with over 30 years in executive management and wealth management, he now champions veteran mental health with unparalleled insight. Please welcome Kenny Polcari. Kenny, welcome to Warrior Money.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys, and thank you for your service.
Hey, right back at you. Hey, this is going to air, obviously, you wore the green jacket for St. Patrick's Day month, so Kenny, appreciate, my mom's half Italian, so we appreciate you. Hey, we start every show with a question. It's called Bluff, bottom line up front.
Yep.
The bluff question to you today is, we're now done the longest wars in American history since 9/11. But we lost over 150,000 troops, veterans, death by suicide. Tell us how you're being part of the solution.
So we're part of the solution because we're an organization that began in 2012 to serve the needs of the veterans that suffer from the hidden wounds of war. Not the physical ones, not the missing arm and missing legs. There's plenty of organizations out there that help veterans that have those needs, but there are not a lot out there that were helping the veterans with the mental wounds of war. And so this started, in 2012, really as an idea by a returning veteran who came back, who couldn't understand why, he couldn't get the mental help he needed. And so there was, he was friends with a couple of private equity guys who said, they have access to the best healthcare in the world, the best medical health care in the world, including mental health, that they could go anywhere they wanted, get the service they needed. And so out of that conversation was born this organization, right, seated by those two private equity guys to get it up and off the ground. And so today we service what started as 9/11 veterans that suffer from the mental wounds of war. We now service veterans, any veteran that comes to us suffering from these mental wounds. And there are many, as you know, and the pace at which these men and women are committing suicide is really amazing in terms of, it's a number that I don't think a lot of Americans understand. 2017 or 22, I guess 22 veterans a day that ultimately take their own life.
Yeah,
we've now lost more veterans by suicide than we lost in 9/11.
Oh, yeah, it's actually 10x.
In the war.
Yeah, so it's 10x on what we lost in combat.
Yeah.
But Headstrong, Zach Iskel has been a friend. He's a great Marine. I joke with him that, Marine muscles are required, intelligence not essential. But then he reminds me the Army stands for aren't ready to be Marine yet. And Dan and I are Army veterans. But Kenny, I love the fact that you guys are focused like a bulldog on a bone on the mental health piece.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's important, right? Because it's the mental wounds, it's the mental health, it's the stuff that goes on in their heads, stuff that they've seen, stuff that they've witnessed, things that they probably never wanted to witness in their whole life, yet then they can't get that image out of their head, and it haunts them. And when it haunts them, then it haunts their partner, their wife, that haunts their family. So it's not just an individual problem, right, that we're helping these veterans.
Yeah. Got Now, I was going to say, there was a great video that Headstrong did. He's a Marine professor at the Naval Academy. And he talked about how PTSD after multiple deployments, how it affected him and his relationship with his wife and kid. And
everything.
He lost basically empathy. He got stressed out.
Right.
She wanted to change the plans, and that wasn't the original plan. How does Headstrong help folks like that, whether they're on active service or veteran?
So the one thing, what's great about Headstrong is that it allows these guys to come in. It's cost-free to them. It's bureaucracy-free. There's no red tape, and it's anonymous, right? Because a lot of the issue with mental health is that for some reason people continue to kind of almost be ashamed talking about, I need some help. I need to go see a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist. People are just ashamed to say it for whatever reason, right? People get sick. People have other diseases and they talk about it, but when it comes to mental health, people don't want to talk about it. So the key to what we do is that we make it easy for them, right? Because we make it anonymous, so they don't have to divulge. We make it cost-free and bureaucracy-free. So these guys come, they come online, they fill it out, and it's not a long form. It's just a form you fill out with the information, and you're going to get a call back from one of our intake technicians within 24 hours. 48 maybe, but 24 is what we focus on, and so they get an immediate assessment. The technician will talk to them, figure out where they're at. where their head is at, kind of what they've been through, and then they'll immediately get assigned to a therapist. And then that meeting happens within days. I guess I don't have to tell you guys, you go to the VA, and what the problem is at the VA is that these guys go to the VA, and the VA is so overwhelmed, they just hand them a bag of drugs, and they say, take these drugs and just come back. They don't need drugs, these guys. That's exactly what they don't need. And so that's exactly what we don't do, right? It's about EMDR therapy. It's about talk therapy. It's about trying to bring these guys back into civilian life.
Yeah, we talk on this show, we talk a lot about finding purpose. And I think it sounds like you found some purpose when you were in New York City on 9/11, the 55th floor, and you were talking about what that looked like and what that trauma was like. I'd love to hear a little bit more of that.
So you want to hear that whole story?
No, I'd love to hear as much about you to share, bud.
I was a member of the New York Stock Exchange, and I had my office on the 55th floor of Tower 2. Now, Tower 2 was the second tower to get hit. Remember, Tower 1 got hit going north to south way up in the 80s and 90s. Tower 2 got hit going west to east in the middle of the building, right between 50 and 70, floors 50 and 70. I was on the 55th floor. I was there that day. I was sitting at my desk. The windows behind me looked right out over the Hudson River. That plane went right through my office. Only by the grace of God am I sitting here even talking to you. And it's only because I got a phone call 8 o'clock in the morning to come to breakfast. It's the only reason I left is because I got the phone call. Had I not gotten the phone call, I wouldn't have gone, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. But one way or the other, I did. For some reason, I was graced that day. I got out of the building. I was over at the New York Stock Exchange when both the first plane hit, which I did not hear or anything because it was way up high, I didn't hear it. I didn't know it. But I came down into the lobby in between the two hits, and so when I was in the lobby at the exchange, there was all that commotion going on, like something happened. You didn't know what happened, and so the guard says, plane flew in the side of the Trade Center, and you almost want to laugh because how could that possibly happen? It was a spectacular day. It wasn't like you can't see them. They were the two biggest things in Manhattan. And then you thought, maybe it was a commuter plane. Some guy just had a heart attack. It happened in, 1946, the Empire State Building, right? He went right into the 86th floor. He said, no. He goes, it was a jet. Jets don't really fly down. That's not part of the flight path, right? So I go in to call my wife, and I dial up the phone, and she picks up the phone, and she's crying, and I'm not really sure. I still have not understood what's happened because I haven't seen it yet, right? People are starting to see now Tower 1 in flames and what had happened and all this speculation. And while I'm on the phone with her, she starts shrieking into the phone because now she's watching on TV live as the second plane came around and came west to east, right through the building with the explosion, the flames and all that stuff. And now, I haven't been on the phone with her for 30 seconds, and I'm still trying to identify what's going on, and she still thinks I'm in the building. And so she's shrieking on the phone, and I'm like, why are you screaming? Why are you screaming? And so when the plane hit, the explosion that came out, because it hit west to east, and the exchange was on the east side of the trade centers, and the explosion was lower because it was in the middle of the building, the way the explosion came out, the whole downtown Manhattan, like the building, the New York Stock Exchange was 3.5 blocks away. But I was standing on the trading floor when it exploded, when the plane hit, and the vibration way over there. And that's when I said to my wife in fairly colorful language, what's going on? And then she started screaming at me. They flew another plane in the Trade Center. I didn't even know who they was yet, right?
Yeah.
So one way or the other, I had to hang up because then it became evident that this was more than just a one-off or a mistake or an error. And here we are at the New York Stock Exchange, which really represents freedom and capitalism and everything America stands for. And so now if you're worried about this being a bigger event, the New York Stock Exchange has got a big flag on it that says, here we are, right? And so I had to evacuate, hung up the phone that day and told my wife I loved her and kissed the girls and tell them Daddy loves them because I didn't know if I was coming home that day. And so, in fact, I got out of the building. We walked all the way down to the East River, and I started to walk home. I lived north of the city, and I got to Chinatown where the Manhattan Bridge comes into the city, and it was just 10 o'clock. And you know what happened at 10 o'clock is when the first building collapsed. And so there I was on the top of the canal. I was on top of Canal Street, right by the Williamsburg Bridge, and I had a perfect shot, a perfect view of the two trade centers. And suddenly there was all this noise, and it sounded like planes from above. And then it sounded like they were blowing up the streets. You know that movie Independence Day where they blow up the streets? And I thought to myself, they're blowing up the streets of Manhattan. And it was the building collapsing. Now, the first building that collapsed was the second building to get hit, which was the building I was in, because it got hit lower and there was so much weight above it that it weakened and it collapsed first. And that's the building I was in. And so had I not gone to breakfast, I wouldn't be here. One way or the other. When Zach and Al Rabel and Dave Petrucco decided to create and launch this organization, Evelyn and I thought, we're first of all, we're very good friends with Al and Dave, and so it became a calling for us, because as far as I was concerned, look, I was 40 years old at the time. I didn't go to war, but there were a lot of young men and women that raised their hand and said, I'm going. And so they went, and so my wife and I discussed it a little bit. It wasn't really a discussion. It was, okay, we're doing it. It was our way of giving back. It was my way of giving back to all the young men and women that went and fought. So it's something very dear to our hearts. And my wife actually is a director of development and large gifts. She's been there since the beginning, 2012, and continues to do that along with the whole team of people that now work at Headstrong. But we're serving, what started out with 3 veterans in New York City in 2012 at Weill Cornell has now turned into, 1,800 veterans this year. I think we've serviced over 200,000 veterans in the 12 years. We've got, a dozen, maybe 15 locations around states around the country. But, when COVID hit, then we went telehealth. So we actually offer telehealth in all 50 states.
Yeah, which is amazing. And from the ashes of that tragedy, how you found purpose, you're with Evelyn and so many others that have made such an incredible difference. So listen, we're gonna get back on that issue when we come back. So we'll be right back. More from Kenny Polcari. Welcome back to Warrior Money. We're here with Kenny Polcari. Kenny, you just got done talking to us about being on the, Tower 2, the day on 9/11, that sense of purpose. Our country rallied around as Americans. They didn't do red, blue, Democrat, Republican. I was just up the road. I was a young Army captain. I was getting ready for Ranger School, teaching at West Point. And then a few months later, I deployed, two deployments myself. You've helped so many veterans. Your next chapter, though, now, we're colleagues here at Yahoo Finance. It's the world's largest business platform, and how do you try to use your voice to help our fellow veterans, especially in business? Well,
so I've launched this podcast called Trader Talk, and it's really talking about the markets, right? But it talks about the markets from, not necessarily a technical perspective or as an analyst, like that. Like you're going to read a research report, not like that. It's much more of a conversation, taking my 40 years of experience on the floor servicing, the hedge fund, the institutional asset management community, now bringing it today. I left that job and I've now taken all that experience to the retail side of the business. So veterans now are on that retail side of the trade, right? And so it's about educating them in terms of how they save, what their goals are, creating a plan, sticking to the plan, not making emotional decisions, all that kind of stuff.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Actually, I was actually on the phone as I was in Trenton, New Jersey to come up here today, talking with my stock guy about not making emotional decisions.
Right.
When you start to see the market acting the way that the market's acting right now,
right.
or you feel some way about the way the market's acting.
Well, of course you're right. So the market's under pressure, and it's been under pressure for a couple of days, but and so everyone gets nervous. And what's really funny about the markets is when the market gets nervous, when stocks get under pressure, the first thing people want to do is sell it, right?
Yeah.
They want to sell their stocks because they're afraid of losing money. But I always use this analogy: when Bloomingdale's puts the suit on sale, and they mark it down 20%. You go and you buy 3 of them because how can you leave it on a counter?
Yeah, go get it.
Meanwhile, Apple's on sale by 20%, and you want to sell it. It doesn't make any sense. It's Apple. It's not like it's some micro nano cap company. Okay, I would say this is a micro nano cap company. You don't want to be there. But if you've got a portfolio that you've designed that's well designed, that represents the biggest names in the industries that you want to be in, and then we have a little bit of anxiety. You got to kind of look at the names you like. You look at the ones that are being most affected. You got to make sure that the reason that they're selling off is nothing other than kind of the cyclical market versus any specific company news, right? So today there's all the, there's this angst coming out about NVIDIA earnings, right? Because it's a crowded trade. Everybody's in it, and it's a crowded rate. So everyone's kind of on the edge of their seats. And so the market's under pressure, and people, to your point, you just spoke to your guy today about not making an emotional decision.
I'll actually tell you why I talked to my guy today. I have a thrift savings plan from the military,
Right.
and I didn't know 2 months ago that you could roll over a thrift savings plan into your actual my primary,
To your
right?
investment.
So-
Is it a retirement? Into a retirement?
Yeah.
account?
So I'm having one of my buddies that was on the show was told me that you can do a rollover from your thrift savings plan into your plan. So I was doing the rollover today on the
Perfect.
phone. So that's literally why I was on the phone. with
Yeah,
him.
so that's good
And then
for
we
you.
got into this chat, and he's like, "Yo, this is what's going on." And then we had a conversation about that. So.
Right, and so I think part of what I talk about on the podcast with the different people we interview is exactly that, trying to create that plan, trying to understand why you have it and understand why you own the things you own, right? You want to own this. Why do you want to own it? Let's do our homework. Let's make sure it fits. Let's make sure it fits the story, what your story is, and then create that plan.
The number one reason why when I was on active duty time and I was doing anything, every person, regardless of rank, was asking, what do I do with my money and
Right.
how do I do it?
Right.
And we talk about it from a perspective of entrepreneurs, like access to capital is a problem.
Right.
But access to financial education to actually, like, what am I going to do with this money that I have?
Right.
And there's no good answer. There's very few places for good answers.
Well, but you know what? People don't have to feel like they have to take responsibility themselves. They can lean on guys like me the same way the country leans on guys like you, right? And so you guys can lean on professionals, people that kind of have done all that work and can help you create and do that plan. You don't have to feel like you're alone. That's the point, right?
I love that.
It's no man left behind. You don't have to.
I love
I'm here
that.
ready to put you on my back and take you with me, right? Because that's what I do. And so if I can do that and help you, better for
I
both
love
of
that.
us.
And I think it's part of the Stoic basically philosophy, right? You put stuff in the market, most of the time, don't be emotional about it, right?
Right.
It's gonna make your money over a long haul. You have to have
Right.
the late gratification.
Right, as long as you're in the right names, right? If you're buying a bunch of micro cap, nano cap names, good luck. Not
So,
working.
Let me talk about those things. So some of you talked about a couple of them, but when you look at things like Comcast,
Yep.
Nike,
Yeah.
Walmart,
Right.
Ralph Lauren, they were all started by veterans. In fact, after World War II, half the veterans start their own small business, create these global iconic brands.
That's right.
for
And they're
our
iconic.
generation. Yes,
Right.
right. And safe. And, yeah,
And
right?
they're safe, and they're great names. Walmart, let's talk about it. It is a bellwether in the U.S. economy, right?
Yep.
And so you have, as veterans, if you're not going to start one of those businesses and grow it, you want to be able to participate by investing in them, right? And understanding them.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what we try to do to educate our brothers and sisters, whether they're going into business for themselves, someone else, but to make their money work for them.
Correct.
And that's why it's great to be partners with you here on Yahoo Finance. But we're going to go to the Q&A. It's called Warrior Q&A, rapid fire. Dan.
I ask them. The first
ahead.
question is, I normally ask the question, what's some money advice that you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger? The question I'm going to rephrase that is, what is the money advice that you're going to tell young veterans now that they should have heard, that they should hear?
Well, it's the same thing that I would say I wish somebody had told me, because look, I'm now 64. I came into this industry in 1980. It was still, the whole financial education thing was still very, very vague and cloudy. And there wasn't anyone that was really telling you what to do, telling you, the sooner you start, the better you off. Not only the sooner you start, but create the plan and stick to it through thick and thin. When you get anxious, when you don't get anxious, just keep putting it away.
to the
Stick
plan.
to the plan over the long term. And the sooner you start, the more you're going to have at the end.
Yeah. And then the last question is, what is the most unexpected part of your journey been?
Wow. That's an innocent question.
I mean,
Unexpected part of my journey with Headstrong, or my journey
just your
of my
general,
life?
because I'm telling you, the part with me would be the New York Stock Exchange. But you tell me whatever
No,
part of your journey
I have
is.
to tell you something. I only ended up at the New York Stock Exchange by accident.
Yeah.
I was a freshman in college down in Washington, D.C., thinking I wanted to be, I was a lawyer and a politician and president of the United States. Thank God that didn't happen, right? And I was exposed. I had the opportunity to go to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange after I met a broker at a Christmas party in New York. I knew nothing about the exchange. I didn't know buy from a sell stock for a bond and 8 from a quarter. And so my first reaction at the time, I remember, was saying, why would I want to go to New York City in the summertime as a 19-year-old? I grew up in Boston. I spent my summers on Cape Cod. Hello, the beaches were calling me, right? Yeah. But then I decided, I said, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to go there. I'm going to have this experience. It's either going to be good or bad. If it's bad, I chalk it up. If it's good, who knows? It could change the course of my life. Dude, it changed the course of my life.
Awesome.
And so I think what's interesting for anybody, veteran or anybody else, is that you never really know which decision you make that's gonna take you down a path that you didn't expect. I never expected the career that I ended up having, and I enjoyed I met my wife there. My wife was a member of the New York Stock Exchange at a
that's
time
awesome.
when there were, a dozen female members. So it was a very, very exciting time. But I think to answer your question was the fact that you never know what decision is going to take you down what road. And that decision I made to ultimately, because my first reaction was, no, why do I want to do it? But then after I thought about it, I said, let me just try it and see what happens. And it, in fact, changed the course of my life.
Yeah, that's how I feel about you in the military.
Your favorite part about being part of Yahoo Finance family?
To your point, right? It is a massive platform. It's it attracts listeners from 20 years old to 70 years old, right? There's something for everybody on the Yahoo platform, whether it's finance for their age, whether it's guys like you talking about building businesses for veterans and supporting veterans, whether it's all the other podcasts that are out there that Yahoo produces. I think it's great to be part of this Yahoo family. And I've enjoyed, mine is still in its infancy. It's only a month old, right? So I'm still tweaking it and building it.
We're 3 months old. We'll tell you all the.
Yeah, but
just follow us.
Get good guests.
I think one of
Get good guests.
One of the greatest parts for me is that I get to do mine on the New York Stock Exchange, where I spent 40 years. So for me, it's like going home.
Oh, that's cool.
Right?
Hey, get good guests. That's number one goal.
Yeah.
You're a good guest.
You
Thanks.
guys have to come and be on my show.
Would love to.
That works. Hey, Kenny, thanks so much for joining us on Warrior Money. All right, so that's our show. So listen, subscribe, and review Warrior Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. Or frankly, find us at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you again next week.